At a time of deep division in today's society, we must come together for humanity's sake. On Can We Talk 360, we strive to stimulate an authentic conversation on issues that affect all of us in an environment of tolerance. I am Eugene Pettis, attorney and community servant. Tune into our discussion to foster a greater awareness of yourself and others. Let's discover how there is strength in our differences and an abundance of possibilities when we stand together as one humanity. I'm excited to have with me two very special guests who I think will give us hope about the future of our society and our country. I've had the privilege of working with the Broward County Schools Debate Initiative for the past 8 years. I have seen how it has transformed and expanded the lives of so many of our youth. Broward County happens to have the largest debate program in the country. And truly, it's one of the jewels of our educational process. It's led to some very dynamic students and individuals. Join me in welcoming our panel for this episode of Can We Talk 360. It's entitled Speaking for the Future. I want to introduce first Courtney Savage. Courtney is a 8th grader at Sawgrass Springs Middle School. And secondly, I have with me Mark Zavaro, who is a senior at Western High School. I think you're going to be equally impressed with them, and I'm interested in hearing their perspectives on many of the issues that we're confronting as adults, and get some insight as to how they think about how they can impact some of these issues at this point and going forward with their generation. It was Mary McLeod Bethune who founded Bethune-Cookman College, or university, I should say, in Daytona Beach, Florida, that once said, "We have a powerful potential in our youth, and we must have the courage to change old ideas and practice so that we may direct their power towards good ends." I'm going to start off with Courtney and ask Courtney to tell us in her own words how her participation in debate has impacted your life.
I would say debate has completely transformed my life. In the past, I've never really genuinely enjoyed a specific subject in school. I just went to school and did it all because I knew having a great education could open up many doors and allow me to have a lot of great opportunities. And I would never want to pass on an opportunity like that. But by joining debate at my school has given me many opportunities that I didn't even know about. Debate has also profoundly changed my outlook on the world as well. It has given me the power to be more open-minded, which tends to be my weakness at times. But by opening up my mind, I get introduced to different ideas that can help me see different solutions to the same problem.
Okay, Mark, how has debate impact you? And tell me, first of all, and I'll go back to Courtney, but tell me, Mark, what form of debate do you participate in, and how has it impact your life?
Sure. So I currently compete in 3 different events. So I compete in extemporaneous speaking, which is kind of an off-the-cuff speaking event. I also do an informative speech, which is a speech where you get to dedicate 10 minutes to inform the public about some topic. And then I also compete in impromptu, which is another kind of off-the-cuff event, but less restricted to politics than extemp. I would say basically for me, competing in speech and debate has given me that kind of proving of anything that I say does have importance. You know, we're taught in middle school, we're taught in high school, you know, you're the next generation. You should try to advocate for what you believe in, try to focus on the future, but you never get taught an actual method of achieving that actual change. And I think speech and debate does a fantastic job in proving to you that, you know, that method is right there. You just have to use the voice that you're given. And that's been my biggest takeaway. It really has, that, you know, my voice does carry magnitude, and I do have that power to change whatever it is I want to change, whether it be locally or even in some cases nationally. So definitely a fantastic experience to try to prove, I guess you'd say, your self-worth.
You know, given your recognition that your voice has power, have you had occasion to take that skill set and use it in an out-of-school platform to do some public good.
Yeah, I definitely think, and that's one of the fantastic parts of speech and debate is you get that option to have that skill set, really. It's not just the competition. Speech and debate does in all ways prepare students with an actual skill set. That off the cuff speaking that I mentioned earlier, that really is something that's proven through me in literally everything I do. I mean, whether it be something in school like a project, but for me, I got the opportunity to take over a role as a leader in a charity, and I would have never taken it if I didn't have those skills of public speaking, persuasion, confidence. Once I got those different actions, those skill sets, that's what gives me the opportunity to go make these speeches, go inform our donors, our board members, this is what's going on, here's what we want to change. So it's really a life lesson in this way, a skill set that you just can't change.
That's awesome. Courtney, tell me about your area of debate, and have you taken your debate skills that you've learned and used them in a platform? And you're young, I mean, you're in the 8th grade, but you're not shy. So have you taken those skills and used them outside of the school setting for some public good?
Yeah. I would say that, like, I feel like I have the ability to ask questions. Well, like, I'm not afraid to be wrong, or I'm not afraid to like speak up when I don't understand something. And I'm in NGHS right now, and I'm trying to watch the officers and see how they deal with problems. And I feel like when I ask questions and when I try to come up with a better solution, I'm using my debate skills that I learn in my day-to-day life at school all the time.
And what type of debate do you participate in, if there's one or two or three types?
So it's my first year. I've been to 3 competitions already. I really love impromptu. Can't do it in high school, but I love it, and I win most of it. And I did a Congress round, and I pretty much enjoyed Congress, so I think I'm going to continue with Congress when I go to high school.
And Mark mentioned the extemporaneous debate, and all of them are so incredibly challenging, and the talent is so impressive. Extemporaneous is always a crowd pleaser, in the sense that the crowd gives, in this case it was Mark, a number of topics. It was like 5 or 6 topics around the world topics, and he gets to select one of the topics and go away and come back in 30-45 minutes and give an extemporaneous speech that he's put together in that time, that he didn't know what it was going to be, and citing sources, etc., to put, and from memory, no notes. He's doing it off the top of his head. It's pretty impressive, and you did an excellent job, both of you in your respective areas at the luncheon. Let me ask you, what's the most common topics? We hear the news, and I'm always wondering, is there a gulf or a gap between our youth in grade school and what we as adults are trying to do? What are the topics that you hear within your circles of friends and organizations, are the topics that your peers are debating in the lunchroom or in the clubs that you're in, that are important to you all? Let's start with Mark on this question.
So it's almost, in a way, I hate to say it, but I really do think that, at least in high school, in my case, a lot of the clubs that I do associate with, the people I interact with in school, they are debate oriented. So I kind of have that privilege of having those debates with people that do know a lot about these different political topics. But it really, unfortunately, does fall along, at least in my instance, along party lines. It's actually a really sad kind of aspect, but at least for me, we do talk about the more hot pressed issues. So, you think your like gun legislation, your immigration. The big one, at least at my school, is climate change. We have a lot of different organizations dedicated to climate change aspects, but it definitely shows, in debate, that these different kind of divides occurring at the political level are what we really focus on. It's not so much I'm going to assign myself the Republican or the Democratic role. in our discussions, it's literally just a discussion of the partisanship. You know, it's kind of something we focus on, that we just can't keep having that political divide. And I think everyone, at least in my school, recognizes it, that it is doing danger to us to have that political divide.
I'm going to get Courtney's response and come back to that point, because I'm interested, Mark, and Courtney, on your perspectives of the political divide, and I want to have a discussion on that. Courtney, what are the hot topics you hear at your school and among your peers?
Well, we're middle schoolers, so definitely not as mature as high schoolers. Definitely not. But I would say that mask mandate is definitely causing like a lot of debate, especially since after Thanksgiving, for us anyway, masks are optional. So everyone's like, are you gonna wear your mask? Are you gonna be wearing your mask? I don't know, I'm confused. So everyone's kind of like all over the place with that. And then I feel like most of the stuff we probably like debate are probably stuff like, oh my gosh, the schoolwork and like how much schoolwork they give to kids in high school credit classes. Because like personally, I'm in like 5 high school credit classes and I have 6 periods. Like I don't like I do a lot of homework and stuff, and so do my friends, and we're staying up late working on it constantly. So like we normally debate about like, why do they give us so much work? Like all the time we're always sitting there debating like, oh, this is so much work. Like, yeah, that's mostly definitely not as mature as high schoolers, but we talk about stuff too.
That you all, we didn't have that much homework back when I was in school. You know, I have 2 daughters who are professionals now, and they got a lot of homework compared to us. And I think you all are getting even more homework compared to them. It's really incredible. You both have raised 2 interesting points that I want to touch bases on. One, mask mandates. And I was just commenting at lunch with a partner of mine of adults fighting so rigidly on my individual right. You can't tell us what to do. These independent, you know, I have my individual rights to do what I want, and I don't have to wear a mask if I don't want to wear a mask, and you can't tell my kids to wear a mask if I don't tell them to wear it. You don't, you know, just the typical rhetoric that we've heard. How have, in your opinion, how have we lost what's good for the community, and seem now to be on a chapter in our society of individual rights, not just with mask mandates, but other areas of our lives? What do you all, how do we get to this point, in your opinion?
Well,
Courtney?
personally, to me, I feel like everyone has their own opinion, and I feel like you can't make a rule and have it suffice for everyone. Like, this rule you make cannot satisfy everyone, and obviously you can't satisfy everyone because everyone has different opinions, different ideas, different ways to solve the same problem. So personally, I feel that even though I feel like people should be able to do their own thing but know the risks, like I feel like as kids, I feel like our parents more of tell us how to act or react to situations because parenting. So pretty much I feel like we kind of learn from what our parents tell us, and we never, I feel like sometimes we're not able to have our own thought process because our parents like tell us what's right from wrong from when we're really little. And when COVID just started, my family and I, we hid out in our house for a full year straight because we were so scared of COVID. And when the vaccine came out, we were so scared too. But my mom, she told me, you know what, I think we should take the vaccine. But I was so nervous because they instilled all this fear in me of COVID from the whole year we were sitting in our house. She instilled this fear in me. But, you know, then my mom, one of my mom's friends, she's a doctor, she put it into perspective for me. Would you like to take a shot or would you like to die? So based on those 2 decisions, I went with let's take a shot. So I went and got my vaccine so I could be safe. But I feel like everyone's going to have their own different ideas about what they think is right in their household. So I feel like it's hard to for people to put a rule. So I feel like them saying masks are optional is a good thing, that people can choose what they want to do in that sense.
Mark, what
So-
what would you say about the just seem like the battle between public good and individual rights that we're facing.
You know, I really hate to bring this back to the discussion I mentioned earlier, but I think we've gotten to the point in society where we're preaching this political ideology dictates your stance on issues. And it seems like, at least in our society, you know, Florida is a really good example. People have opinions, but their opinions become overwashed by what they see in what a party should be representing. You know, it's not uncommon knowledge for us that in our society, we do have dozens of regulations by the government, Congress, to different actions of our state. You know, we have the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, and they do actions all the time that regulate what we can and can't do. But it never became an issue to this degree. And I think because we mobilized this issue of mask mandates, COVID-19, the quarantines, it became that issue of political intention, which mandates in our government inherently don't have to be. But I think, at least in this discussion for mask mandates, it comes down to a sense of morality. And I think we've lost that touch on morality, at least in our society, where we've allowed our political leanings to get in the way of our morality. And at least for us, you know, we've been mask optional for, it's November, a month and a half. So that month and a half is just proving that, you know what, yeah, we have the kids that do want to wear the mask, and that's good for them, their expression. And then you have the other ones that are opposing it. And it's even gotten to a point in some high schools, you know, even on the debate community we've talked, where in high schools, we've actually had kids that are wearing masks get socially punished, not abused, punished, but restricted from social actions by their peers for wearing a mask, because we've gotten to the point where kids fall along this line of where, you know, you wear a mask, you conform, oh, you're conforming to the government. And it's a tragedy. It really is, but it shouldn't have ever become that party lined issue, at least in my opinion.
Well stated. And, you know, one of the concerns I have is, how do we pull back from it? You know, every issue is so politicized. It used to be a time where statesmen and stateswomen made decisions that were good for society. We may not have agreed politically on certain things, but for the public good, we're able to come to some agreement. And now you hear it every single day, just the badgering that goes back and forth within parties, and one party against the other party. So everything has gotten politicized, everything. And it's seeping into our schools, it's seeping into our public space, our media space, just you name it, it's seeped into it. And it really concerns me of how do we save ourselves from ourselves. I mean, we are going down a slippery slope. And when the courts and the politics and the people we send to Washington or to Tallahassee for the state of Florida are seeing the party divide, and there is no exception. There are good ideas on every side of the party. Put them together and let's come up with the best. And somehow we've lost that over the last couple of decades, and it seems to be trending in a very concerning way. You know, how do we address that, Courtney, with your peers? I mean, you'll be in high school next year.
Yeah, nerve-wracking. Very nerve-wracking. But I feel like a lot of the times when differences come up, we divide ourselves a lot. And I feel like this is just another example of it, like politically. I don't watch the news too much because like it gives me like a sense of anxiety a lot of the time, so I don't watch the news. I just kind of focus on my own because I feel like I don't want like false things from the news to kind of get into my head. But based on what Mark said and what I kind of summed up, what I summed up was that the two political parties pretty much saying that if you're on this party, you have to believe this, this, and this, and this. If you're on this party, you have to believe this, this, and this. But there's no middle. You can't be in the middle. You're either one or the other. And I feel like in a way, that's how we are with a lot of things. There's no middle. It's always in black and white. But I feel like eventually, hopefully, we'll start to see stuff in color. Like, I know some of my friends, they're going to be wearing their masks to school, but they'll take it down sometimes. For me, that's like a kind of like a middle of I'm going to wear my mask or I'm not going to wear my mask. So I feel like that's a middle. Like, I'll bring my mask, but I'll wear it down sometimes. I'll keep it up when I need to, when I'm around a lot of people, that sort of stuff. So I feel like we tend to see stuff in black and white a lot.
Mark, you're getting ready to take off to some fine university, University of Florida or someplace in the country. I teased you at the luncheon about the University of Florida being on your list. It wasn't on your list, but you had some fine institutions, if I remember, Princeton and some others. When I ask the question, I'm asking it truly with interest. From your perspective, from your experience, how do we turn this around? What would be one thing you think we can do? And again, it's not a one idea solution, but I'm interested in, from your perspective, what would be one of the things you say we need to do in order to start being more civil in our approach to various issues in society?
So I'll start with this. You'll have to excuse me. Everything I've done in debate, the extemporaneous speaker in me is always going to go political and economic. But in this instance, I think it's really a lead by example circumstance, and we lack the basic compromise. We've gotten to the point, as you alluded to earlier, there's divides occurring not only between parties, but now within parties as well, to the point that, in the Democratic Party, you have progressives and the socialists going against the conservatives. And at the same time, you have in the conservative parties and the Republican Party, the far right against the right, and it's becoming increasingly divided. I think we lead by example. In the people that we elect to Congress in DC, they need to work on compromise. If we have this compromise on issues of national importance, we just passed this bipartisan infrastructure deal. We keep committing actions like this, proving that both sides of this aisle can work together. You prove to the people around this country that progress is not made on the basis of one party. Progress is made when we come together. And, it's just as Courtney mentioned, we learn as kids, as youth, from the parents, from the teachers, from the adults around us. If they learn from the people they elect to government that, you do have progress made when you come together, that trickle down effect is going to reach our schools. And you show that compromise is key. I think one of the biggest issues is that we're taught indirectly that, in government, if you have two sides, right, two parties holding two different branches of the government, that nothing will ever happen. I know for me personally in my government class, one of the biggest topics that we've discussed is if you have a Democratic president and then a Republican Congress, nothing is going to get passed because it's just going to become a veto power between the two. But if we can show that Republicans can work with Democrats and you want different opinions instead of trying to hate upon that aspect, you prove that we can work together as a country. And that unity that we start in DC is going to trickle down to the students. And I really think that trickle down effect is what we need to see in schools. And it's what we need to see in government, national and state. Without it, we only prove the false notion that, nothing happens in division, which simply, unfortunately for our country, isn't true.
And you were talking trickling down. Sometime I think it may need to somehow trickle up. It may need to come from us, as citizens, that this is not acceptable. This is not tolerant. Because I think a lot of our politicians do what they can do and get away with it. If they felt they were going to be in jeopardy of their seat because they're out of line with what the public wants, I think that they would, behave differently. So I'm not optimistic that we can let them guide us. Sometimes we need to guide them through the vote, through who we're putting in office, as you indicated. Let's talk social media. I mean, it's just such a big part of all of our lives, particularly you all don't remember a world without social media, probably. It's been so dominant, certainly Courtney. From your perspective, how is social media impacting the generation of your peers?
Okay, I'm not on social media, and personally, this is a very good thing for me because I see like with TikTok especially, like when they have all these challenges and all this stuff, I feel like it's just a lot sometimes. And they had this challenge, I think it's Devious Lick, where you go and vandalize or take something from your school or whatever, and kids were getting arrested on our campus for doing that. And that way, I think social media affects teens very, very badly in that way, because like a bunch of bathrooms were broken, stuff was vandalized, and all this stuff. I just feel like that was not a good show of how social media can help people. Like, it's made there to help connect, see funny things, say hi to your friends in a different country or different state. I feel like those are the good views of social media. But like everything has a bad side, has a good side. But I just feel like, to me, in my grade and age level, I feel like maybe, I don't know if the maturity is just not there, or it's just being kids, learning stuff, trying to figure out how stuff goes, trying different things. So I don't know, but I just feel like social media right now is just a lot right now for kids, especially.
Yeah, Mark, you're a little more mature in years and experience. How is it impacting your high school constituents and friends?
Yeah, I really think at a high school level, I would almost stray to say that it's worse. There is a degree of maturity, but as you reach these increased years, the increased experience, you unfortunately do have more power. Once you have the juniors, the seniors that have their license, their cars, they can drive, they can do their own acts of freedom, you then see an uptake in these different actions that are trending on social media. And at risk of sounding like a supporter of Big Brother, it comes down to the ultimate, government regulation. We've had, I want to say, I don't want to call them protests, but borderline assemblies at our schools where kids will literally protest when our school will cut off a VPN or not allow us to access Instagram in schools or Snapchat, because it's become so interwoven into our daily lives. And I think social media as a whole is a fantastic platform. It's where you get to spread your voice. If you have a digital voice, you can use it. You can use it for dozens of different resources. I mean, I know for at least me personally, some of my biggest outreach is on social media. But it comes to the point where we get so reliant on it that any type of restriction on it ends up causing massive issues. And then it's just like Courtney just mentioned. The second something negative starts happening on social media, if people subscribe to that trend, you then create this cycle of borderline violence. And then the second that it's taken away, you restart the cycle of violence and protesting. So I don't know if it's restriction. I don't know if, you just have to have bans in school. But I think personally, social media is mobilizing this cyclical nature that we simply can't afford when it comes to these different trends, especially on more globalized products like Instagram, TikTok, Facebook.
In one of my previous podcasts earlier this year, a guest suggested that we have official social media best practices taught in the schools. Do you agree or disagree that is needed?
I'll step in here. Honestly, I think needed it is. It is definitely something that has merit in being necessary. But on focusing on actual implementation, I just don't think it would have any substantive progress being made. It is a class that we all need to see. It is a class that kids definitely need to get taught. But it comes down to ultimately, if the kid's going to respect the class, and if the student is going to respect the principles that the class is teaching. And I see time and time again in high school where there's classes that we're mandated to take, and they're helpful, but no one respects the content. And then the second you don't respect the content, it means nothing. It's just like the personal finance classes. We had mandates under Tallahassee where we had to have personal finance in schools if you weren't taking other classes. We all need personal finance. I guarantee if we take a poll at any high school, the majority of people will not know how to do taxes or write out an invoice or a check. So it's a helpful class, but no one follows through with it. It just becomes a pile of assignments and a pile of coursework. And then you see kids, dropping out, not taking the class seriously, and it just defeats the purpose. So
I agree with Mark
Yeah.
on that, most definitely, because I remember in 6th grade in Hillsborough County, we're supposed to take a course on drugs and how to not be addicted to whatever and whatever. But the thing is, these kids get taught the course and they go through the course and they do everything, but they don't care that much. And then you see kids getting cigarettes, and especially now with vapes at like 13, and you see all this stuff. So it's like, yes, it'd be nice for it to be implemented, but there's a slight chance that they're going to take it seriously in the end. It would be great, but I don't think it'll be taken seriously.
You don't see any behavioral changes coming out of it. In
No.
part, let's say the class is an hour. The next of the 23 hours of that day, they're on their own. It almost seems that the place to curb some of what we're seeing in social media is in the home. Through how you raise your child. Courtney, you indicated you're not on social media. In part, that's probably got something to do with your parents and the rules of the household. And they're not we've turned a lot of responsibility over to children to make adult decisions. And we're seeing the consequences of it. I do a lot of litigation. I'm a litigator. And in years past, I did a lot of litigation for the school board of Broward County. I can tell you of cases where death occurred as a result of what started on social media. It's sad that we're in that space where people exchange different insults, if you will. And I've seen, the Ratley case that was a nationally reported case about 4 or 5 years ago. I can't remember, where a high school boy went to, I think it was Deerfield Middle School, and it was social media based, and stomped the girl with steel toe boots because of what she said on social media about his brother who had committed suicide. I can go on, but somehow that's going to be one of the issues that y'all are going to have to confront. It's
an issue though. Like when you see them saying, "Oh, we're gonna come shoot up the school now" and whatever on social media, it's a problem, especially when, like, I think it was Coral Glades, which is like right next to our school. Someone said, "Oh, we're gonna come shoot up this hallway or whatever at this time, blah blah blah, run for your life or whatever." And the thing is, they were in a lockdown, and we were on a close watch, like, because we could go into lockdown soon. So it's really a problem when you think about it, because it's like all these kids, all these parents. At my old school, this kid did a prank that there was a shooter in the school. We all were like so traumatized after that day because it was a real lockdown. It was a real scary thing, and my mom was traumatized, and I didn't want to go to school the next day. And like I can only imagine the kids at Douglas who were scared, and I just can't even imagine, because it's not a joke. It's for real. Like, you don't know if it's true or false, so they just call in all these people when it could be fake, but you don't know. So it's safe or sorry.
If I may just add really quickly. So one of the biggest things that, has sparked my speech and debate career is when I was in 8th grade is when we had our first major incident, which was Marjory Stoneman Douglas. And I lost one of my best friends in that incident. But one of the things that we proved coming out of that attack is that legislation that is being pushed onto schools and even in society cannot be black and white. When we had the student groups coming out of MSD, coming out of South Florida, even Western in my own high school, the biggest motive was incorporating aspects of our society into this legislation. And I think that addresses the earlier question, how do we fix this issue? For me personally, I think it comes down to the inclusion of psychology. We pass this legislation, but we neglect to think about the people's reaction. And it creates this almost, I want to say, operant conditioning model where you have people being punished, but you have no reward system. Kids are going to become immune to punishment over time. Punishment exists on a plane where it's still punishment. The second we stop allowing punishment to become punishment, you have nothing, because schools are neglecting that reward side of the operant conditioning. So I don't think, forcing another class upon a student becomes, in that case, anything beneficial. I think our best instance in trying to persuade that notion against social media becomes a reward system. Don't follow suit, take this safe practice, get a reward. Train the positive aspects of society and trying to go against the negatives. And, kids have one of the most powerful voices, that we can have. Following MSD, the state legislatures, all across the districts, especially in Broward County, pushed constantly for gun reform. We got to Tallahassee, but one of the biggest movements that we had were the high school students. They related to the incident, they related to the parents. And it's the same effect here. If we allow the high school students, the middle school students, the elementary school students who are in the issue to be the ones pushing for change, it means more. Quite frankly, me sitting in high school, the decisions of one 75-year-old man in Washington, D.C., I'm not going to be personally affected by that decision because I simply don't care about that opinion since it doesn't affect what I'm going through today. If you have people that are living in the issue, being the ones advocating for change, the peers respect that. We listen to each other more than we listen to someone we've never met. And I think that's where that principle comes down. Let the kids living in the situation be the one guiding the change.
How do we allow that guiding the change and allow that voice to be heard? What ideas can we come up with? Because I agree. I think one of the most powerful, they also had the march in Washington, the students, the young lady with the short haircut from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas was one of the people I remember from the march. But how do we create a platform and a process that allows those voices to be regularly heard? It almost feels like it touches upon social media again, in a good use of social media. But some of it gets so drowned in. If you talk about gun control on social media, you're going to get swamped with people that want 100 guns, and automatic weapons, and there's nothing wrong with it. What ideas of how your voices can be better heard on some of these critical issues? So loud until when they went to Tallahassee, they sat down with the governor at that point in time and talked to the legislators and had some impact, at least for a while, with Washington politicians. What do we need to do to bring that back and to have some more lasting impact? Courtney?
So, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Mark, go ahead. You got to start it.
Yeah, you can go.
Okay. So, you know what? I think actually the MSD reference we just made, that was, I want to say, almost like the case study. That one, the girl we're talking about, Emma Gonzalez, who protested, from MSD up to Congress, proved that the incorporation of emotion was a driving factor. Gonzalez constantly referenced, I was there, my friends were there. She was able to build that personal connection. And I think that comes down to the embodiment of student groups. In my high school specifically, we have well over 15 clubs that are dedicated to teaching these safe practices. One of them that I'm a member of, we call it the HIP Club. It's a nationally represented group, but the main idea is to have the seniors, the juniors, be the ones teaching the freshmen and the sophomores about the aspects of social media, the effects that we've seen personally. If we sit down on the first day of school and we get a packet and it says, oh, social media is dangerous because you could get impacted by bullying and online bullying and cyberbullying, and then you have all of these different aspects. it's a threat, it sounds awful, but none of us can relate to it because it's just the black and white poster message. If we have kids, seniors, juniors, even freshmen who have had experiences with these issues, impacting them directly, being the ones going to the classes, saying, here's how it's impacted me. Here's a real-time example of how this works, proving that kids are not immune. I think personally, I'll admit this on myself. When I was a freshman, we sat through these classes. It was like, oh, that'll never impact me. I'm exempt. It'll never touch me. And then I've seen throughout my entire high school, some of my closest friends be hit the hardest by these issues of social media. So now if I say to, my sister who is a freshman, look, don't get involved in this because, I've seen the effect that it's had on this person, she understands that message more than if her teacher was just reciprocating a PowerPoint that Tallahassee provided. So it comes down to relatability. And I think if we push schools to have these programs that are student directed, that teach these message of self-awareness, you have increased results with relatability in schools. And that can go up to Tallahassee itself. The mandates coming out of the state of Florida legislature are the ones pushing for teachers, the principals, the school boards to do these, campaigns. Kids don't relate to those messages. If the narrative is changed, where you have every school has to have X club, every school has to have X student organization, you then allow for voices to be created in the schools on the basis of these kids. And I really think utilizing relatability, examples, and self-connection from the current students themselves builds a connection that no other connection we can form will create.
Well stated. Courtney.
I agree with Mark on that. I really agree with him on that. It was a good point you stated, because I feel like when you have a teacher explaining something to you, you don't really get it sometimes because they're living a different life than you. They're not in the same area or maybe age group as you, right? And I agree that like if a freshman came to me and told me, don't do this, this, and this, and this, and they're in that grade, I'll be like, oh, let me take your experience and then apply it to my life. And when my parents say, oh, make sure you don't do this, this, and this, I apply it sometimes, but then I end up making a mistake, even though they told me this, this, and this. But I feel like you have a good point saying that if it is student directed, it should be able to speak for itself. And not only that, but I feel like when you see kids who are so motivated to stop a certain thing, then especially when you have more than one person and you have a group and not a protest, but you have a lot of people coming together to support something, not violently or anything, peacefully though. When you have that sort of stuff, it kind of persuades people a lot more than it just being one person saying, oh, I think this is this, and posting it on social media versus having a group or a website to visit.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Courtney, you mentioned the pandemic in your household. You said you were all locked down for basically the better part of a year. It had an impact on all of us. I think it had a disproportionate impact on our youth. In many instances, just looking at some of the traditions, proms were skipped. Things that I look back on now from my high school years, graduations were not in person, and the list goes on. What was one of the major things you learned, and I'll start with you, Courtney, about yourself during the pandemic?
I would say that number one being, I learned I am definitely an extrovert. I am not shy. I love to interact with people. A lot of people describe me as bubbly, fun, energetic, hyper, like all over the place. And this is very true. And when I was stuck in my house with my family, it was like, I just see you every day. I don't want to talk to you, but you're the only person in my house. So we just had to sit there next to each other all the time. And I feel like I just learned that I love to socialize with other people, and I need that in my life. And thank God now that I can go and do that. But before, it was just so horrible. But I also learned that my family and I, we definitely bonded I learned more about my family. We told stories, but I just feel like there were no events going on at our dinner table, and it was awkward. Like every single night, we were like, "So, what'd you do today?" "Oh, I was on the computer." "Oh, you? Oh, yeah, I was also on the computer." So it was just not as eventful, but I learned that blood definitely is thicker than water in my case. That my family has my back, and we stood side by side when it was a tall challenge up against us. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Great. Mark, what did you learn?
My biggest takeaway was honestly twofold. The first is that when there is a will, there is a way. I am the same way as Courtney, completely extroverted. I feed myself off of having that interaction. When that was taken away, there were 2 or 3 weeks where it was like, what am I going to do? I have nothing. But then there's that will, you need to have the interaction. I never thought, 3 years ago that a Zoom call would be a mode of having interaction. And then over COVID-19, it was like every single night I was on a Zoom call for 4 hours talking to, friends from school, debate members, trying to interact. And it honestly worked. It proved to at least me that the digital world is an option because we had that will to have that connection, and the way definitely got, made. The second thing is that I love to keep myself busy. When we were online, it became, you sit through school, you're online, you sleep through school, you do this through, like, it became the same pattern over and over. I just started taking on more and more things. And the more I did that, the more I fell in love with different aspects of my life. And honestly, it's driven my passion today, even though we're back in school, to have that connection that I built up online, plus my new work ethic that I got to work on myself with that time of reflection. It's coming back to, I guess you'd say, benefit me even today. So lessons learned.
That's awesome. That is awesome. We've talked about some societal issues. What do you all think are the critical issues facing the educational institution today, from your perspective? Either of you could get started.
I know this is going to sound like the stereotypical student talking, but objectively speaking, disregarding my position as a student, the foundations of Common Core, in our schools, I really genuinely believe is one of the biggest issues facing our education. We have these schools built on the premise of making sure kids pass the Common Core assessments at the end of the year. It gets the point across that you have to learn Algebra 1, you have to learn your civics. It's good inherently, but you miss out on the creative freedom. You miss out on the basic principles of the education that you can see in other instances. There's examples all around even Broward County where these schools that are private charter schools that aren't following some of the state public school mandates or Common Core from the government, their kids are participating in debate, they're participating in drama, they're taking business classes, law classes, because they're getting to follow their own opinions, what they're interested in. And in my view, it saves them thousands of dollars in college when they can take these classes in high school and say, you know what, I really do like politics, I really enjoy law. Now I don't have to go waste my time in these other classes trying to find out a career in college. But we've built up this place in our society where Common Core is so important. There was a time where FSA results would come out at the end of the year and we'd all huddle up as a group and be like, oh my God, what'd you get? I got a 5, I got a 4. What'd you like? It became a competition, and it should have never gotten to the point where the entire point of our education was to prove your testability. And it's reflecting even today, because the people coming out of the public schools are so well acquainted to the testing that the liberal arts institutions, the universities across the United States, they're having issues because the kids they're admitting are following the textbooks. They're following what they've always been taught is, learn the material, reciprocate it on a test, and you're good. When you start talking about processing, critical thinking, that's not taught in schools. So when you start asking that of students in college, it goes away because it was never taught to them. So I think, at least for us, that mandate on the Common Core has become so integral to our schools that it honestly has done more harm than good.
Very interesting perspective. And there's a lot of, even all the way through, law school, you look at those things that you're forced to take and you were taught and what you utilize. And the skills that you utilize are often the skills that you get very little education on in school, because they're busy teaching you the Common Core subjects, calculus and stuff that I'll fortunately never have to use again in my life. But you spend a lot of time in those classes, but you miss how to have strategic thinking, analytical thinking, creativity, communication skills, some of the things that you use each and every day that we don't spend enough time teaching to students. And I do think we have some of that backwards. Courtney?
I definitely can agree with Mark on that. I feel like right now I am trying to apply to American Heritage. And right now they're like, what are your goals and for your future? So my mom's like, what do you want to be? Because I'm trying to write this essay. And I am so stumped because I have absolutely no idea. When you're younger, you're like, oh, maybe I'll be a firefighter and a ballerina and also a tooth fairy. But I can't say that anymore. Like, I have to narrow it down, and it's so hard because since after debate now, I'm like thinking lawyer, and now I'm also thinking orthodontist, and now now I'm thinking, oh wait, but I don't like science that much. But I mean, it's just the one class I'm taking though, and I'm like bouncing back and forth between all this stuff, and then my teacher brings up, oh, what about computer science? You kind of like that, and I'm like, and I don't know what to do, and it's mostly because no one there's no class to guide me through this. There's no one that I can like personally go to that knows me very well for me to go and ask them, hey, what should I do? Is there like a test I can take to figure out what I want to do? But I don't know. So honestly, I feel like it's a good point to have like a wider range of classes than just like I always have to be language arts, math, science. Because I don't like language arts at all. I'll write a poem. I like writing poems, but I don't like language arts. I didn't take it this year because I did it online, so I don't have to take it in school. Because for me, it's a waste of time. So is gym. I took gym over the summer, so I don't have to take it. I think it's a waste of time. And I replace it with other stuff so that it can be influential to me in some point down the line. So I feel like, yeah, I wish there were a wider range of classes than it just being, oh yeah, math, science, history, this, and the rest of them, and language arts. I wish there was a wider range for me to choose from.
Let's, I could talk to you all and discuss these things all day. I mean, you all are two really sharp young folks, and I would love to track where you go from here. The future is bright for both of you. One topic I thought would be a fun way to end the session with you and put your debate skills to the test is, what would you be better, being really big or really small? Which would you choose? What would be better, being really big or really small?
Personally, I don't know. If it's between tall and small, I'd probably, even though my mom is like 5'9" and my dad's like 6'4" and they're really tall, I'd prefer to be like really small. And I'd say this mostly because like I like watching Guinness World Records and all that stuff. And when you look at the tallest man in the world, he's like around 8 feet and 7 inches. Like he's tall. And I think about it, it's cool and everything, but it's like, he has a certain a rare condition, and it's like pituitary gigantism, I think, and it's where he has like painful if you have like larger hands, like bigger bones, but you have painful joints. And I feel like I'd sacrifice my height to not have like painful joints, and shorter people have a lower chance have a higher life expectancy than taller people. So I'm like, oh, I want to stay away from death as long as I can. So I'd probably say I'd want to be like short. I'd want to be smaller and shorter.
Okay, Mark.
Well, you definitely get your wish for seeing the debate skills, because I'm going to have to disagree on this one. At least for me personally, it's in all the work that I've done up to this point, the 18 years I've been on this planet, it's incredibly evident that as much as we like to say that every voice is treated equally, the reality is that in this country, around the world, that's not always the case. And a lot of times we see these instances where metaphorically, the smaller people don't get that representation. They don't have their voices heard to the same degree the big people do. And, I've built up all of this experience in being that voice for these people that can't help themselves. One of my biggest goals in the charity that I work with has been trying to help people in a small community in Bauchi State, Nigeria. The ways of life there are completely different than the ways of life we have here in the United States. But it takes a voice that is bigger, that can be heard to help them. So I would rather be too big, to be the one that has that metaphorically larger than life kind of opinion, to be able to help the people that couldn't help themselves. I feel like if we are too small, our voice gets lost. And I think that's one of the defining principles of this generation, is that we have to be the voice. There's too much that has been taken away, too much at risk. So as long as we are the bigger people, we have the voice needed. That's the voice that creates change. Not to, disagree with the opinion of Courtney. I feel like in my experience, maybe it's the high schooler in me talking. It comes down to the point where we have to be the ones responsible for change. And the only way we do that is if we are the bigger people. So I know that wasn't a direct representation of the question, but metaphorically speaking, at least in my eyes, I'd rather be the bigger person that has that voice for the smaller people to help the people that need it the most.
No, I think that both of those are excellent answers and two interesting perspectives. I want to thank Courtney and Mark. Thank you so much for your time. I was impressed with you all at the luncheon. I'm even more impressed to kind of get off the grid and hear some of your expressions and opinions on topics that we've discussed. There's so much we can learn from each other by listening. And I think is not that the older people have it right. I think we should have a process where we listen from the youth, because you all have not been tainted as much as some of the things that happen over time. And you all are a representation of what is possible. And Mark, you've mentioned several times to have your voice heard. You have to commit to making sure that you all have the confidence and the commitment to have your voices heard on topics. You have the skills and the stature to be a beacon of hope and light to your friends and to people that don't know you. So thank you so much for your time. And please stay in touch, and I'm going to stay in touch with y'all. If there's anything that I can do along the way, please reach out to me. I wish each of you all the best.
The law firm of Halitzer, Pettis & Schwam is a proud sponsor of the Can We Talk 360 podcast. Our firm handles medical malpractice, wrongful death, catastrophic personal injury litigation, and workers' compensation matters. We pride ourselves in being advocates for justice on behalf of those who have been seriously injured. For decades, we've taken the lead in making your case our priority. It's who we are. It's who we'll always be. Halitzer, Pettis & Schwam. Serious injuries, proven results.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Can We Talk 360. I sincerely hope that you were inspired to seize this moment in time and take real action towards change. Remember, all change begins with a conversation. Be sure to tune in every month for more fascinating discussions and motivational food for the soul. Please share with your friends, family, and colleagues. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Can We Talk 360, and visit us on the web at www.canwetalk360.com.